I think this is a generation where dads are like owning fatherhood in a completely different way and almost raising the bar, as it should always have been probably, but raising the bar for generations to come.
Hello and welcome to the Dad Dialogue podcast, the show where dads talk about the successes and stresses of becoming a father and being a father. Thanks for joining us today. I am your host, Laurence. Reminder, you can go over to daddialogue.co.uk. There is a sign-up form over there if you would like to register your interest in coming on the show. I'd really like to hear from you. Today's guest is Pete from Pyramid Park. Pete is a musician, recording artist, songwriter, graphic designer, based out of England. He has two girls that are 7 and 3 years old. In our conversation today, we talk about lots of different things. We talk on some of the lighthearted stuff, like how he and his family have adapted to a recent move that they've been through. Some of the classic things that parents love to share. Some of those funny toilet stories do come up, I'm afraid, in this episode. But then we also do touch on some of the heavy side of things relating to grief and losses, and how Pete has been able to process some of the grief that he's been through into something beautiful by creating music and art out of it that has allowed him to connect with many people at his different shows. We also talk about what it's like becoming a father after having already lost your father, which is an experience that he and I have both had and relate to. I really hope you enjoy this conversation. Do make sure you check out Pete at Pyramid Park, at all his different social media places. Links will be up in the description, of course. But yeah, let's get into the conversation. All right, so Pete, thanks so much for joining us, coming on the Dad Dialogue podcast. Why don't you start off just by telling the listeners a little bit about yourself and your family?
Yeah, so my name is Pete. I am now based in rural Norfolk in the UK, which is East Anglia, for those who don't know their geography very well. And I am a musician / graphic designer. I'm currently studying, so third year graphic design, going into my third year. And been making music for a long time, write a lot of songs. So I'm more in the kind of songwriting, recording space, live original music, that kind of thing. And I have two daughters who are 7 and 3 years old.
Mm. And I know you recently moved to Norfolk. So how are you and the family and the daughters kind of adjusting to life there?
Yeah, good. I think on the whole, it's way more space than what we've had in Cambridge where we were before, both in terms of just it's more room to breathe than being on the end of an estate. So that's been really nice. We've just got so much gardening to do now compared to where we were before. So all my arms have kind of got scratches and various different, I don't know, legs, arms, whatever. Don't do trimming hedges with with flip flops on. That's kind of what I'm learning. But yeah, I'm really enjoying it. The sunsets are amazing. People are super friendly. We've befriended some cats and some pigs that seem to escape every so often, like piglets. So not too big, thankfully. But it's fun. It's good.
It sounds like proper set up to a classic English novel or something. You know,
absolutely.
The way you're describing it.
Yeah, it's idyllic, I suppose. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe not quite. But I'm sure there's things that are wrong with the place, but we're enjoying it at the moment.
Well, yeah, that's always the way when you're quite new. So how are your girls adjusting? I guess it's 7 and 3. The older one is probably able to express herself a little bit better.
Yes, she is expressing herself at the moment. And I think she's found it quite hard because she's made some really good friends at her old school. But even with her school set up, it's all changing this year for her anyway. So I think what she's missing is probably something that's not going to be a reality if she was still there. But yeah, she's loving having her own room for the first time. And my youngest, she's definitely settled in. She's quite more, I suppose my oldest is a bit more of a city girl. My youngest is loving the countryside, just loving it, embracing it. But I think, they love the space. They love just being able to walk down the road. There's a little stream not far from us, so they love going there. And I think on the whole they're doing well, but it has been a challenge to kind of explain about friendships and how that works. So we're on a journey there.
Yeah.
But today we went for an early visit to our new school, and that was a real win. And the head teacher was there. We
That's
just
nice.
looked around, and she kind of put her, I think that really helped her. She's kind of, I don't know, brought some perspective to her, I suppose.
Kind of made it a bit more real, like what the life's actually going to look like.
Yeah, exactly. And I think once you can see it and feel it and touch it, it really is a lot easier.
For sure. And did you and your wife kind of expect these reactions from your two girls? Did you kind of know one's a bit more city, one's a bit more country? Were you kind of anticipating this?
Probably not to this extreme. I mean, yes and no. We knew it was going to be. We knew there would be like hiccups along the way, but we probably thought our eldest, because she's more confident than our youngest, we thought she would definitely jump at the chance of making new friends. So I think once she's in school and has a routine, she's a real routine girl. I think she'll be fine. But yeah, we thought our youngest would find it really hard, and she's actually done a little better than what we thought. So hey, we'll take that.
Yeah. I mean, that's true, but it's good to hear, because I think it's just one of those things that you hear kind of a lot of people talk about, that especially once the kids are in school, they kind of have that fear of making that big move again. So I think it's a process that a lot of people kind of go through and have a lot of those questions. But at the end of the day, you've got to
really hard, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, we were kind of in a position where we knew this is a move for the future rather than for the present. But just at the end of year 2, which in English schools, that's quite a good time to make a change. So yeah, it's a risk. I think everything in life is a risk. Sometimes staying is a risk as well, and keeping everything the same can lead to kind of, I don't know, the fear of stepping out and doing things as a family. So I think as long as they know that they're in it with you together, there's, we're not perfect parents at all. I feel a bit of a fake coming on a dad dialogue podcast in some ways. But, there's that reality, isn't there, of, we're figuring it out all together. So
you can only make the
that's
decisions that you think at the time.
Totally.
Was it the Clash that did "Should I Stay or Should I Go"? Was it them? Was it someone else?
Probably, yeah. I'm going to say yes, but
the way you said it, just reminded me of that song. I was just like,
it's a great
should
song.
I stay or should I go? Yeah. For those that know, the next lyric is, if I go, there will be trouble, but if I stay, there will be double. So
there we go.
I wanted to get into kind of what you do. You said you're a musician and you're studying graphic design and moving house and looking after the 2 kids. So what does your kind of day-to-day look like? How do you balance that? Like, where do your hours go? Do you have any time for sleep? Like what are you doing each day?
Sleep has been a challenge lately. So at the moment it's summer holidays. So I have been my wife works 3 days a week at the moment. So I'm taking Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday to look after the girls. I have Mondays and Fridays to work, which is more music related at the moment because the study is really quiet. And then I will work most evenings as well, which is normally only an hour and a half because that's as much energy as I have. But I'm figuring I need to probably do that in order to kind of not stress about it in the days that I'm with the girls. And then any time where they might be, say, 4:00 in our house, it's normally crazy times. They're normally sitting watching TV, and we try and wait until then to put them in front of it. But then until eating around 5, I might be able to catch up on a few emails if I'm cooking dinner as well. So it's that kind of thing. And then weekends at the moment, we are trying to keep them free. We're, still figuring a lot of things out. So quite a lot of practical things. We're looking for a church at the moment, that kind of thing. And then during weekdays, when it gets to school, it'll be a lot different. My wife will work every day, but in school hours, the girls will be at nursery and school in school hours. And then I will be working or studying. I'm in uni like once or twice a week. So I'll have 2 days of quite intense, not being around much. But then the rest of it, I can fit in around them a little bit more. So I'll do the drop offs or the pickups, one or the other. And that's really cool. Like just being able to do that. I love taking the girls to school. I really enjoy that. And I've tried to do that as much as I can. So yeah, but it's challenging because I'm effectively running a limited company, and the music thing is like a DIY record label. Really, it's not that, but it's effectively running a record label. So you're doing anything from marketing, tour stuff, songwriting, creative design, video, whatever. And there's a huge amount of work, and I'm always dropping balls all the time. So yeah, this summer has been, I've recorded a project, and this summer has been creating the assets for that visually, and trying to get a couple of contracts in place, that kind of thing. So yeah, but because the world has changed so much, I'm able to hop on in the evenings, and I have some people I'm working with at the moment in LA. So that's perfect for connecting with them. And it would work better than first thing in the morning. So it kind of works, you make it work, don't you?
Yeah. It's interesting. I think for someone who has never kind of been self-employed, I've always been like employed or now unemployed, being a stay-at-home dad. Our mutual friend, Matt, I think I spoke to him in our episode about this. So if anyone relates to this conversation, they go back to listen to that one as well. I think when hearing people talk about kind of running their own business and running their own financials in terms of, and also supporting a family, to me, that just screams like stressors and like having that security of an employer and like, oh, the wage is going to be this and the benefits are going to be this. And I always have like such admiration for the people that have the desire to do the creative and the dream and follow that. How are you able to kind of value your time? Like, are you able to kind of like equate, oh, I'm doing this hour and a half in this evening, and I know that this hour and a half is roughly going to earn me this amount of money? Do you think of it in that sense, or do you just know these are the things that have to get done and this is the time I'm going to do them?
More the second, to be honest. I know what I need to do financially to survive, I guess. In the music world, it's really success is survival. And I know that sounds like really, it's not woe is me. It's more just that is the reality, unless you are a mega pop star. Those doing the grind. So you have to have lots of different revenue streams, and it's about having those set up and feeding those pots essentially. So whether that be through kind of Patreon model, whether it's through live gigs, merch. So I could be spending an evening, 2 evenings, 3 evenings designing t-shirts, and there's no revenue. But I know when I play live, when you're sitting here booking tour dates, when you play live, that's when you'll get some of that revenue back. So it's just kind of, you go through seasons, I think. So festival season in the summer, that's really important. Having a really good, clear release schedule, and then you just need to get stuff done for that. And then the stuff kind of the money trickles in eventually, but it's a long process. And for me as a songwriter, it's about having works that over time you've got a catalog, and that catalog starts to generate income over the time, but it's not a big earner. For me, it's about a calling thing rather than a money thing. And we have kind of seen the money, we've struggled at times, really, really struggled. And we've also had times where it's just come in and it's been like, oh, wow. There have been times where I had to get a job. I worked for a year pressing T-shirts, which was great for thinking time, but really dull, as you can imagine. And hence the reason of doing graphic design now, because I want something that, I can have a little more stability to kind of balance it out a bit. Because even with touring with one kid was quite easy. It was hard because she wasn't sleeping, so it was really tough when I was away for my wife, and then tough on me when I came back. But it was doable. But with two, it's been a lot harder to kind of get that balance right and know when to be away and when not to be away.
Yeah, that's a really interesting aspect. Can you so when you're talking about songs that you write, is it all for your project, or do you write for anything else?
Mainly for my project, Pyramid Park, but also for I've got a side project which I'm working with a producer friend of mine, and that is to pitch for TV and film.
Right.
But it's a slow project because we're both super busy with our own things. So it's pretty much there. It's actually pretty much mixed, I think, from what I remember. But
Cool.
yeah, it's just good to have stuff where those songs for me are like not stuff I would include on Pyramid Park records, but they're still good songs, but they're just not in the style of Pyramid Park. So it's good to be able to actually do something with it and kind of try and use those for other things that I'm not particularly emotionally attached to. So yeah.
Can you tell listeners a little bit more about like the style that you're alluding to with Pyramid Park, if they're interested and want to check you out?
Sure. Yeah, it's indie or indie pop songs, and I've got, I don't know how many projects. I'm actually about to release an album early next year. So gradually releasing singles from that come mid-September, I think. 20th of September is the first one, called Cyclones and Silence. I'm just trying to write really honest songs, to be honest. So this particular album is based on grief, really, really upbeat focus. You know, this is what you get from me, I'm afraid, just honesty. So
go for it. Tell us.
Yeah, it's about effectively processing the loss of my mother-in-law, who was based in New Zealand, Auckland, New Zealand. My wife's from Auckland. And we managed to get back during COVID times, amazingly, to say our last goodbyes to her. She had terminal cancer, and it was really interesting for me watching my wife grieve and being part of that grief myself, but kind of almost from third party rather than first person. And I was processing the album was written in two parts. It was written while we were out there saying our last goodbyes, kind of as therapy for me more than anything else, just a sense of, I need to get this stuff out of me somewhere. Oh, here's a guitar. Let's get out that way. And then the second half was written kind of 6 months after she died, and really working through some of the stuff that went on through that whole process, you know, stuff I didn't even realize was going on in me. And now it's all starting to come out again. And so I never intended to write an album about it, but I always feel like the best songs are often the ones where they're not effortless, but they have, there's something you need to say as an artist. And I think
it has momentum.
Exactly. And it's easy to churn out product if you're not careful, but this feels more like the art side of creating. So something deeply meaningful, but also something that hopefully people can connect with as well.
For sure. No, I'm sorry that you and your family went through that. I'm sorry to hear about the loss, but it's nice to kind of try and bring something beautiful out of that situation, and to kind of make something.
Well, we all walk through loss, don't we? We all face it, whether it's tragic or whether it's kind of through old age or whatever that might look like. And I think it's good to kind of give words and emotion to help others working through it as well. Yeah, that's my theory anyway. So,
well, that kind of segues us. Yeah, but that segues us nicely into your song "Father, Father." Do you think you can tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, "Father, Father" was a song I always wanted to write, but never knew how to write. Talking about grief and loss, you know, I think one of the reasons why this recent loss was so intense was almost because it was reflecting back to me my childhood. I was 11 when we got the news that my dad was going to die of cancer. He had 3 weeks after we found out. Wow. And so we kind of were thrown from this kind of normal world to like real complete chaos. And it was during that time, there's several things that I remember really clearly from that. And they're things that I cannot ever probably forget unless I get dementia, and even then I might remember, who knows. But they were, I was there when he died. I was present. I wanted to be there. And I remember that scene, like I could close my eyes and just be back in that room. And I remember half an hour later when the doctor came to certify his death, which again is something you never really think about as a kid, how death looks like in practice. And I remember sitting on the floor of my parents' room, kind of processing it in this kind of weird headspace of numbness and deep emotion. And I heard this voice in my head saying, you can choose me to be your father or reject me. And it wasn't like an imaginary voice. It wasn't an audible voice, but it was somewhere in between. It was like a voice into my soul. And I remember just kind of responding, because I've grown up in a faith family. And I'd never heard this tone before, but I knew it was real, and I knew it was personal. And I knew instinctively that it was this higher power, which I would call God. And I just felt all I could do was respond, which was, God, I choose you to be my father. Help. It's probably one of the most powerful prayers I've ever prayed in my life, a gut reaction kind of prayer. And throughout the next period of my life, I was 11, just going to high school. I think I was like week 2 of high school. He died on the Saturday. We went to church on the Sunday, went to school on the Monday. It was just like real life. Yeah. And my form tutor at the time pulled me over and he said, I just want you to know that, when you go through grief, there's people who say nice things to you because they don't know what to say. But then there's people who say stuff who know what you've been through because they've walked it themselves. And he was like, he said, when I just want you to know, I'm really sorry for your loss, but it wasn't like an apology. It was more like straight to my soul, you're going to get through this. But he kind of said, when I was 11, my mum died of liver cancer, which is what my dad had. And I just started high school, and I know exactly how it feels to be in your position. If you ever need to talk to me, I'm here. My 2 younger sisters had school teachers who had either lost their husband or lost their dad that year. And it was a case of like all these things were lining up without us even trying. And I started to see what I would call the father heart of God in my life, practically. Like these people showing up. They weren't my dad, but they were pretty incredible coincidences. And this would happen for several years after that, where certain men would come into my life who would be a bit of a dad to me in certain things without trying to fill the void of my dad. So I always wanted to write about God being the father to the fatherless, and tried many times, and it never really felt right until one night I sat in, we'd moved house into the first home we owned, and I sat down with my guitar and just wrote the song from start to finish. So yeah, the song was super quick to write, and I hardly edited it at all. Recorded it on an album, and then re-recorded like a live version of it as well, and started just playing it live everywhere. And I noticed that I was having conversations with people in all sorts of places where I wouldn't expect to be having these conversations, and it was always this song that was unlocking these conversations. And all I would do is just share a little bit about my backstory, why the song was written, and who it was for. And basically, I guess it wasn't a dedication, but it was effectively dedicating the song to anyone who had lost a loved one recently. And you'd have these remarkable conversations with people, some who'd been, really traumatic divorces when they were kids, and they were just kind of still hurting from it as like late teen, early 20s. Some where they, I remember one girl who was sharing her story about how, she was the oldest of 3 kids. Her dad became an alcoholic when her mum died, and she was like 15 and just trying to hold her family together. And that song kind of gave her hope. And you play these gigs and that's great, and you prepare and you do all the stuff that you need to do to make them happen. But the real thing is actually behind the scenes in these one-to-one conversations, that a song unlocks someone's heart enough to be able to then get healing. And I think that's my greatest privilege as a songwriter, having those conversations with people, because I just wouldn't have them otherwise without the vehicle of
Yeah.
a song. So I feel like that song in particular is like a gift that I didn't really make happen. It just came to me, a
Yeah.
supernatural thing, you know, and I'm grateful for it.
That's so powerful. And I think it kind of goes to show that people who go through tough times, they do want to talk about it and they do want to share it. And they may not, even though if they have their support systems in place, it can sometimes be really difficult to share those sort of things with the people that you know, and almost connecting with a stranger as they're up on stage singing a song. As you said, it can bring healing to these people that have otherwise not been able to express themselves and connect with something. Um, how does like that story, sort of you losing your father quite early, quite young, and then how has that played into your journey of becoming a father yourself?
Huge. It's really huge for me. I think, firstly, I always wanted to be a dad. Like, from a young age, having lost my dad, it was something I was really passionate about. I couldn't really explain why, but I always wanted to be a dad. So that was the first thing. Whereas I think a lot of guys growing up, they're like, oh, the childhood thing. No, not sure.
Yeah.
It wasn't an issue for me. It's a lot harder than I thought it would be, but I had this romantic view of it. Secondly, it's really made me careful about how I say goodbye, because you never know when your last goodbye will be. And my last spoken goodbye to my dad was the night before he died, you know. So he had to rush to hospital, then he came back home. But by the time he was home and I was back in the house, he was effectively just lying there without being able to speak. And so I'm really aware of, you know, if there's issues with my immediate family, with my girls or Lizzie, my wife, you know, I need to kind of deal with that quite quickly and make
Right.
sure that there's peace between us. Like, that's just something I just do now on auto, and make sure that I kind of tell the girls how I feel about them, even when we've had a bad day, that they know that they're loved. And that can be hard when you're having these really big battles or meltdowns, but it's something that's quite important. Yeah, and I think from a spiritual perspective, one thing that my dad input kind of put into me was like simple things, simple spiritual practices that really help me continue that on. And I'm trying to do that with my girls without forcing it down their throat. I'm just kind of trying to introduce them to stuff that I think would be really good for them spiritually. And lastly, for me, it has given me a sense of grasping life and not being, you know, I'm naturally probably quite a timid person. And yeah, it's like my dad's death was like a shock to my system and woke up the braver side of me. And
Right.
I try and live life without regrets. I have regrets, of course, but try and, I guess the choice of even doing music as a career, if you even want to call it that, that's a risky thing, as as you well know. And but to not run away from that as part of who I'm meant to be, and for the girls to see that, I think is really important for them to be courageous and brave in their own field, whatever that might look like for them in the future. I want them to see, yeah, their dad had a good go at something, and even if it wasn't a success in some people's eyes, it was, you know, better to do that than not.
Yeah.
So yeah, massively affected me.
That's awesome. And one of the things I've noticed from talking to lots of different dads, not specifically about grief in any way, but I think one of the things that a trend is that pops up is the words that we say to the children are more important than sometimes we give credit to. And I think it can be very easy to say something offhandedly or a slip of the tongue or, you know, whatever it might be, just kind of something that we're saying things that aren't really that important. Like, you know, the kids trying to show us something. It's like, oh, that's cool. Oh, that's nice. And like, but that's the same thing that they've heard over and over again. They just want that little bit of engagement and that little bit of like, oh, that's really cool. I'm proud that you were able to do this, this, and this.
Mm.
And the thing that I've noticed from talking about experienced fathers is just that these kids are like way smarter than you think. Even at yours, like 3 and 7, they know what we're saying to them, and they do pick up on trends and patterns and stuff. So I think being so purposeful about what you want to say to them, to tell them that they are special and important, even if you've had a slightly bad day, is such an important thing.
Yeah, yeah, and that's easy to kind of, we all, well, I certainly gloss over that, but it's a value that I think you want them to feel that sense of, yeah, I love you. I'm behind you. I want you to do well. My heart is that you succeed and that you prosper, and that you are also able to then turn that around and put that onto others, bless others, encourage others. Absolutely.
Agreed. And I lost my dad in my early 20s when I was 21,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
22, I think. And the amount of people that would say to me is like, "Oh, he wouldn't really say much of things," but the people would tell me, "Oh, he would like show you that he was proud of you, and he would show you that he like cared for you, and he would show you that he loved you." But and I could look back on these things and know that these things were happening, and obviously people do show love in different ways, and people receive love in different ways. And when it comes to passing that on to our children, it's just a trace of trying as much as possible. From what I find is, it's not just about showing; it's about trying to say things as well. Because I think the generation of parents that kind of brought us into the world, I find at least, was that I hear from a lot of people that, my dad showed me that he loved me by doing this, this, and this, but he never really said it. And that seems to be a
Yeah,
trend
and
that a lot of us are trying to stop, it seems.
yeah, and I think, not to big up millennial dads too much, but I think there is a change with millennial dads compared to other generations, where there is a sense of, we have to be more involved. Hearing about you being a stay-at-home dad, that's amazing, and that should be celebrated. The fact that, I remember taking a day off a week just to be at home with Lily, or that was so good to be able to do that. It wasn't a whole stay-at-home thing, but it was something that was more than what I'd experienced. And I understand times were different back then, and I get it, but I think this is a generation where dads are like owning fatherhood in a completely different way and almost raising the bar, as it should always have been probably, but raising the bar for generations to come. That's really, really, and that's not and necessarily people of faith. That's people all across the board. It seems to be like people are saying, no more. We can't just live like we used to. We can't accept how it used to be. We want to learn. We want to grow. We want to change the psychology of how we do parenting as well. And I think it'll be really interesting to see the impact of that in, say, 30, 40 years time. It could be disastrous, but I kind of feel it's quite hopeful.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I mean, it could be. It could kind of switch the balance the completely other way from the next few generations, and they want to do the complete opposite. Who knows? But
Yeah, who knows?
How do you think a partnership plays into this? Because this is something I always find interesting, talking specifically with Christian dads about how important do you think like the partnership in the marriage is for being a supportive father and like a father that can do all he wants to do?
It's essential, and it's not easy. In fact, I would say we both go to bed most nights thinking, haven't nailed it as a parent today. But to have even that level of recognition and self-reflection helps so much to then be able to, okay, I had an example today. I was having a heated debate with my 7-year-old, and and I could just, Lizzie happened to be not in a meeting and was upstairs working from home, and I said, look, I'm gonna really do something. I'm gonna say something I'm gonna regret. Can you come in and like just intervene for a couple of minutes? I just need to call off and walk away. And that kind of thing is really, really helpful. And she'd do the same with me and just be like, I'm done. I'm gonna have to just hand this over to you. And we both understand that we're not the most patient people in the world, and so we have to tag team it quite a lot to be able to manage our own emotions in it. We have big big-hearted kids because we're both quite emotional people. So we have to appreciate that they're just like us, but really telling the truth. And that's really helpful, having both of us being like, okay, yeah. And we do call each other out occasionally on stuff when necessary. I think carrying the load as well. Like, I couldn't do the music thing without my wife, without a doubt. I just wouldn't be able to be as good at it as, I'm not great, but I'm better than what I would be without her in lots of ways. And kind of honoring what's in her as well as what's in me, and being good with, like, okay, so she brings in more money than me, so how do I feel about that? Am I secure in that? That's something I had to work through. And I might be more creative in certain areas than her, so how does she feel about that? Does that make me the fun parent or whatever? It doesn't necessarily, but it's kind of trying to be, we do balance each other out, and we see things that the other doesn't see. And I think, that's awesome. If I was a single dad, I'd suck at certain things, like uniforms, for example. I mean, I just forget.
Hairstyles.
I could, yeah, maybe that'd be interesting. Plaits, they would never go plat again, for example.
I just want to pick up on something that you said, because I think it's interesting, and I think it's something that's not spoken about much. Is you said that your wife makes more than you, and you had to work through that. Can you tell us what that felt like, to having to like work through that and understand that in the context of your marriage?
Yeah, I think for me, I've always been quite self-sufficient. I didn't get married till I was 28, so I was a single guy for a lot of the time. I quite enjoyed that. That allowed me to have freedom to do my thing, to travel, to play, to tour, to live on a really tight budget. And I enjoyed the challenge almost of that. I'm the kind of guy that I do best when I've got quite a challenge. I'm a fighter. So yeah, to have someone who was like more successful career-wise than me that was the most intimidating thing. And what was interesting, people love Lizzie when they meet her, and I totally don't mind this. We're both introverts, but I'm the guy they warm up to. No, they don't love me necessarily straight away, and I've grown to really accept that and be like, do you know what? That's really great. They love her, and that's good. It means I don't have to talk.
Socializing.
Let them love them. Let them love her. But in the early days, it's like, oh man, I have to match this energy. I've got to match, her paper, or better than her. And that, I think that's just insecurity, isn't it? That you over time accept this is a partnership. This is not a competition. I always have thrived in the past in competition because deep down I was insecure. And actually now I don't care so much. And amazingly, career-wise, things happen more when you don't care so much in some ways, because it's like you're not trying too hard. And that's really releasing. So yeah,
that's really interesting that you kind of it's interesting that something that you've worked through that has then kind of like for your marriage, but it seemed to have like then impacted an aspect of your kind of like financial, your like economic and your job sense of worth as well. That's really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just found it interesting that you mentioned it, because I wanted to pick it up, because I think you mentioned the millennial dads being like a successful thing, but I think when you see Instagram parenting profiles and family profiles, I mean, they're like so many follows and views and stuff, but they can still, even if they're a really good heart and mindset, there's still like the tiniest bit of like toxicity and that's what like gets the engagement. I think a fully wholesome, loving family doesn't really get the engagement. So I still see all these like comments about, oh yeah, lying to your wife about when you're going to be home, and she's like, "Oh, it's okay if you lie when I'm going to go home, because I told him I only spent $100 on the credit card, but I actually spent $1,000." Like all these like tit for tat. But in reality, is like just toxic traits within a relationship. And I think the aspect of a man actually kind of taking a step back and approaching a marriage entirely in that kind of bubble of this is all together, and what I bring is this thing, you bring this thing, and the thing you bring just happens to be a bit more money than me, and I happen to bring these other traits, that it all works together for the good. And it's something that I think other guys do kind of like struggle with it and wrestle with those ideas of, like you said, insecurity.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that often when you go to social events, the first thing people ask is, "Oh, what do you do?"
Yeah.
And I've started asking people, "What does your life look like at the moment?" Because it's like, let's take it away from just men doing. Not that it's just with men; it's just a generic question to ask, isn't it? But it's a really lazy question to ask, and there's so much more about people that's like, well, what about this person who they might have just traveled to this really incredible place, or they might have a great recommendation for a restaurant, or do you know what, they might have this really quirky like curiosity, I don't know, hobby of some sort that could be like super interesting rather than marketing, or I'm CEO of my own little business that's really actually not that impressive when you look at it. And also takes away the whole thing of like, if someone says, "Oh, I'm an accountant," you don't just yawn straight away, because I know a great accountant who's really interesting. But you can delete that if you really want. No offense, accountants. My dad was one.
No, I think, but I think everyone can connect with what you're kind of getting at. It's that conversation and the traps that everyone falls into.
Yeah, sure.
I
I've done it loads.
Yeah, me too. And I think even other parents will ask me, like, "Oh yeah, what do you do?" So like, "Oh, I'm a stay-at-home dad," and the response is either like, "Oh, that's cool," or it'll be like, "Oh, that's awesome. I'd love to do that," but then like no follow-up still.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, like, conversing with someone is for a benefit, and we don't just want to answer that one question. So no, I totally agree that trying to connect with people and find out what where their heart's going, like what they're into, what their interests are, and so what takes you there. So I often ask dads for stories that they want to share, and during our email, you didn't give me too much detail, but you just told me. So I'm a bit curious. You said I could either share about a beach story or a poo story. So, I mean, we might have time for both. Which one do you want to talk about first?
Well, I think the beach is the most recent. It was this week. I decided to be stupid and take both our girls on Tuesday to a beach, which I've never been to before, because we've just moved house, of course. So we managed to get them hyped for the day. They are really responsive. They go to the toilet when I ask them to. They do their things. We arrive at the beach, and obviously there's a lot of nagging questions that you get along the way. It's an hour's drive away, so it's a bit of time. But we get there. It's really windy, and the beach that I went to was really sandy, like thin sand, not thick. There's a long stretch before you get to the sea, and the wind was picking up, and I'd warned the girls and say, like, "Look, it's windy. You need to wear your sunglasses. It's just, you're going to get it in your eyes if you don't. We are literally picking up sand and it's flying into your face. So please do that." Anyway, we have lunch early. My oldest is getting grumpy. And suddenly, out of nowhere, we're all chilled. I've given her loads of, like, if you need the toilet, you need to let me know. I've got to pack all this stuff up. It's just me on my own. Lizzie's not around. Anyway, my oldest is like, "Daddy, I'm bursting," and holding a groin. And she's like, I need to go now. I'm like, crap. Okay. So I'm looking at you do a quick scan of the situation. Like, okay. At the very same time, I kid you not, my youngest has decided to throw her sunglasses away and has got like this wind full of sand in her face. She's holding her eye with like as if she's like lost it, like, my eye, rubbing the sand in her eye. It's raw red. And she's just like walking around like half blind, like in circles. my oldest is about to wet herself, and it's not going to be pretty. And there's people watching. Of course, there's people watching us.
Yeah.
So I'm grabbing all the stuff, throw up the towels, trying to get the sand off. There's a guy really close to me going, Ma! Of course, from the stand I've flung over in his direction. He's really mad at me. We finally get to like the steps to get up to the concrete bit so you can walk along and run to the toilet, which I still don't know where the toilet is. Rookie error. My youngest is still holding an iron and complaining about not having the right shoes, so we're trying to get the right shoes on her. My oldest is still like dripping almost, and then we just leg it. 3-year-old running, not particularly fast. 7-year-old kind of holding herself, like hopping along. And eventually the nearest thing we can do is get to the car, and we thankfully have this travel potty, which is like for a 2 or 3-year-old, not for anyone older than that. My youngest is like, right, I'm going in the car. Like, oldest is saying that. So we get in the car. She manages to just about deposit it all in the potty, while the youngest is still eye patching it away, and and cars are trying to get into our space because I think we're leaving, and I'm like just a ball of stress. We made it, and then the youngest eventually did need to go to the toilet, and we managed to find, this is one of my biggest bugbears in the UK, like men's toilets. Get to the toilets, both the men's like cubicles are out of order, and I'm like, crap, where do I go? There's 4 urinals. Do I just place in front of one of those and hope it's a backwards wee and not a front wee?
Hope for the best.
And blokes are walking in like looking at, why are girls in here, you know? So we eventually get to the bottom of it, and both girls go to the toilet, and we get an ice cream, and everyone's happy again. But man, I'm never going to the beach again on my own. Never ever again.
Well, if you do, you'll pick a spot closer to the toilets.
Yeah, if I do. Yeah, there were horrible toilets as well. No baby changing or anything. Do you find that with dad toilets, like hit and miss, or is it pretty good where you are? Yeah.
Just really briefly. So this is, I haven't told the story on this podcast before, but it's pertinent to what you just said. So we're in the I thought what you were going to say was that you had to pay for the toilets. Because in some like popular beach places in England, like I think in certain areas of Brighton, for example, where I used to live, you have to pay, and some areas in like Portsmouth, have to pay for the public toilets. Oops. And here in the Netherlands, in The Hague, where I live, pretty much every public toilet you have to pay for. Even in like the local libraries, like the main library in like the centre of town, if you go in there, you still have to pay, unless you're a member. There's one free toilet in the kind of central hub of the city, and that's within the Stadhuis. The city offices, basically City Hall. So City Hall is also where you go to do all your immigration stuff. And this would have been about a year ago now. So when we first moved here, we were sorting out mine and my 2 sons' residence cards, and this meeting went on for so long. We'd done all the paperwork, we've done all the stuff, but they just needed to keep us there to process all the stuff and sign things and what have you. My youngest would have been about 8 months at this time, and like we were kind of getting towards the end. The oldest was getting a bit cranky, and the youngest is just full on, like not quite exploded out of his nappy, but like nearly. He's done a big smelly number 2, and I have to hold him in a certain position because it's one of those ones that like, if you hold it, if you move around too much, it will start to squidge out.
Yeah. So
I ask, like, are we nearly done? And they're like, yeah, it'll be just a few more minutes. So I asked, is there somewhere I can change him afterwards we're finished? And, if you go around to the toilet, they'll be there. And there was an attendant at the toilet. So I was changing, and this attendant led me straight into the women's toilet. And the women's toilet only had one it basically was like a cubicle. It was almost like a disabled cubicle, and then you come out, and there was like 2 sinks, and that was it. So there were sinks, but there were no other toilets there. It was just one toilet, and he was just like screaming because obviously he was like tired. He's like 8 months with nap time, whatever. You know, he doesn't want to be in an appointment. My oldest is just like watching something on my phone, trying to keep him occupied. And I kid you not, I must have come out of that toilet, and there are like 8 women just staring at me. And once they realize at the back of the line, they just walk off. because they realize, oh, there's only one toilet here.
Yeah.
So that's the thing, because it's the only free toilet in the city centre, so many people try to use it, even if they're not using the city hall. And I just had this, when like eyes pierce into your skin.
And
it was
and the Dutch are forthright as well.
But thankfully they didn't say anything, or maybe they did. And it was in Dutch. I didn't understand it. I can't remember exactly. My Dutch is better now, but they might have said something that I don't understand.
Right.
But yeah, it's super common to like. There's just no changing, just a changing mat in the men's lavatory. It's all it needed, and I would have been able to do that. Instead, the setup was that it was this whole one contained cubicle for women. That was the only changing mat. So
yeah, it's a real problem, and I suppose in men's toilets as well. It's often there's like one out of order at least, and it's often you change kids on the floor. If there's any form of urinal nearby, you're changing them in wee. So it's like this horrible thing. Anyway, that's one of my big bugbears.
I think a lot of men, they kind of share stories about the mastering the changing on the lap if they're like sat on the toilet and like getting that one down once they're small enough. But that's a nice segue, I guess, into what you said. Your other story you might want to share is poo stories.
Yeah, I mean, this
we just make this whole end of the episode just all about smut and see if people stick around for the end.
I mean, my youngest, she's far more willing than my oldest when it came to potty training, so we could do it a lot younger. But she didn't have the communication skills. So, and I'd had a day with them, and I felt really smug because Lizzie had really struggled for a couple of days with her potty training, and I just was like, I'm nailing this. I kept my eyes on her the whole day. She's like, it was 6 o'clock. I remember it because Lizzie was about to come in from work, and I just was like, right, 5 minutes. I'm going to go out, get the washing in, and we're good. And then Lizzie's going to come in, and we can carry the load for the rest of the evening until she goes to bed. I walked back in, and my oldest was like, Adley's done a poo. And I'm like, what do you mean? And she's like, and the next thing I see is Adelaide's foot walking straight into this massive turd on our light, like off-white carpet in our lounge that we know we're going to need to sell fairly soon. And Adley just looks at me as if to say, no, I haven't, and runs. And so we have these, and it wasn't like a solid. It was proper like orangey, browny, bluey kind of color. And she's just walking, running all the way into our kitchen. And I'm just like, while still more poo coming out of her at the same time. My oldest is just like holding her nose going, it stinks! It stinks! Daddy, it stinks! She stinks! Just really overplaying it. Obviously it stinks. And it did stink. And I'm just, I'm like, how can this happen? I've kept my eyes on her all day. And it's just like this one moment of like stupidly doing a chore instead of watching her, and she's gone. So that was an hour of clearing up pretty much and reassuring her that it's okay to go, but next time please go in the potty. So yeah, short but sweet, that one.
It seems as though she was maybe waiting for you to turn your back. She's like, I know what I'm going to do.
She's a monkey, honestly. She is that kid. Without a doubt. She knew.
So I'm going to hold it for as long as I can. And he turns
his back.
Found
that is the optimum time for her to go now regularly. So it's kind of like maybe it was release point all along. Who knows?
Well, I remember one of the pieces of advice I got before I became a new dad was just like take notes of things like that and routines, and you'd be surprised at what they kind of fall into. So speaking of new dads, I actually kind of tend to end every episode with asking the guests if they have any particular stories or advice for a specific like new dad, someone soon to be or just welcomed their first child into the world.
Yeah, I mean, it's a wild ride. Get ready for anything to happen. I think the first thing is get sleep, as much sleep as you can beforehand. But also like you can do a lot more than what you think you can do on very little sleep. We had 5 years of, very interrupted sleep. And I remember hearing someone saying that about one of theirs. I'm like, no way, how can you survive? And we did survive. Also, like, just lower your expectations, like in terms of, for us, we've kind of been like, do you know what, we're probably not going to go on holiday and have a rest. So either we go on holiday and expect to not have a rest, or we actually stay at home and try and just tone down the schedule for a couple of weeks and see that as a bit more of a holiday experience. That has really helped us to kind of not over complicate things with the girls. So yeah, just manage your expectations, and you can do more than what you think, but also be prepared to just drop some things and you know, love them. They've only got one dad, so love them.
Agreed. Totally agreed. I would just add to what you're saying about the expectations and what you can do. I think similar to your beach story, I've just said that the worst time is like the first time that you do something. I was like, there's the first time you take your newborn outside by yourself. There's the first time that you do a night by yourself. There's the first time that you might welcome your second one into your life. And it's the first time that you have two kids all day by yourself. And firsts can be a little bit scary, but I think they're always fine. And then after that, they get better. That's what I've always tried to take away from things.
And you figure it out, don't you? And you I always find if we do like a day, like a good trip out somewhere where it might have been tough, they're normally really content just being at home the next day. And both days are good days. They're just different.
Agreed. Awesome. Well, Pete, thanks so much for the time today. I really enjoyed talking to you, hearing all your stories. Do you want to just like quickly tell the listeners where they can maybe check you out? Where's the best place to engage with you and Pyramid Park?
Yeah, sure. So pyramidpark.net is my website, but just search Pyramid Park on the usual streaming platforms, and you'll find it. There's obviously links to merch and stuff, or my Instagram handle's at number one Pyramid Park. So go look at those things, and you'll find out the rest.
Awesome. Well, thank you, mate, for the time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And there we have another Dad Dialogue conversation. Of course, a huge thank you to Pete for coming on the show and kind of bearing all with us and sharing so much about his process with us, sharing so much about the stories of losing these different people, as well as just some of those funny stories about being a dad. I think we were able to learn a lot about Pete from this discussion, and I really, really enjoyed talking with him. So I'm really appreciative of him coming on the show and opening up with us. Do make sure you go and check out Pete, as I said, the different social media places. And if this story about the song Father, Father resonated with you, make sure you listen to that song. It's a really impactful song, especially for someone who has been through the process of losing someone like a father figure in that position. Yeah. Again, if you would like to come on the show yourself, just go to daddial.co.uk, fill out the sign-up form, get in touch with me there. I'd really like to hear from you. Otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope to talk to you again soon. Goodbye.